So good morning, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us in this new technological era. Sometimes we just need a little bit more time to get it to cooperate. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for bearing with us through that. Our speakers today hail from Michigan Protection and Advocacy Services, Incorporated. Noah Walker is the voter engagement specialist, and Mark McWilliams is the director of policy and I believe communication. And they're going to talk with us a little bit about voting and how we can, the importance of voting, voting rights, and how to make sure that you are voting safely during the coronavirus pandemic. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark or Noah. Who's going first?
Let me introduce let me introduce our project a little bit, Noah, and then I'm going to ask Noah, who's going to do the presentation on voting rights, and then we'll answer questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Tedra, and thanks everyone for joining us. Looks like we have a pretty good sized crowd here, so thanks for being part of this. Noah and I are with Michigan Protection and Advocacy Service. We are the protection and advocacy agency in Michigan. One of the things we do is we do outreach and education and advocacy related to voting rights. That includes individual advocacy for people with disabilities who are denied the right to exercise their right to vote. It includes information and assistance for people who want to learn to register to vote. So you can contact us and we'll send you information about voter registration. We do training to people with disabilities on voting rights and becoming informed on voting issues. We participate with the Bureau of Elections, with stakeholders, and with advocates and other folks to do training, help develop training for election clerks. And the training you'll see today, that is training designed for transition, people in transition to post-school activities to talk about, get their information about voting rights. We have provided support for a number of national projects, including one of the videos that you'll hopefully get a chance to see today on from Rooted in Rights and other groups on access to voting, featuring some people from Michigan. We do policy education. We also co-sponsor some nonpartisan candidate forums. We will have one coming up regarding the federal election, actually in October, that we're working on with employer provider organizations. And we do a lot of posting on voting rights. So that is part of our work, and glad we'll get a chance to give you some information today. And with that, I'm going to ask Noah to take over and provide the information to you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm going to do that. We'll start from the beginning. So my name is Noah Walker, and just like Tedra said, I am the voter engagement specialist for MPAS. So I'm going to go ahead and start this introduction here from a Supreme Court case. It says that no right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which as good citizens we must live. And this is sort of like the reasoning for really supporting the Voting Rights Act. But the ironic thing was that people with disabilities didn't get true full access until the Help America Vote Act. Beforehand, they had punch cards that people would put inside that were, filled with numerous problems when it came to accessibility. So that was something that had to be fought for. And now that it's currently in place since 2002, people with disabilities have the right to vote privately and independently. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward here. So really what we want you to do is to really put your voice out there, make informed decisions based on what's important to you, and then vote for who and what you want. I know that sounds kind of hard when there have been a lot of articles that say that you must like vote for somebody because the other candidate is dangerous. Well, I want you to really to be more informed. I want you to actually look at which policies are really going to fit with who's going to be elected, and at the same token, also focus on how these political candidates carry themselves. And because of the informed vote, it's really important to understand not just policy platforms, but really about the agenda of what the candidates are speaking to, what their agenda is, and if they especially have like a disability-related agenda, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or a third party, I would especially recommend researching that. See if that's really a good idea to kind of get in more contact with that candidate. I think that's a really, really great idea. If you're really curious about what any kind of political incumbent is doing, and political incumbent means somebody currently in office, usually their websites have like some kind of news feed where they find any kind of updates about which bills they sponsored, and their speeches, and basically why they voted the way that they did. And that's certainly true within the Michigan state government website at michigan.gov, or also in the U.S. House of Representatives, or if you're, if there's like, the President of the United States, with their reasoning of supporting any kind of orders that they have or any kind of laws that they propose, then it's really important to check that out. So there are some fact-checking websites that are nonpartisan. PolitiFact and Snopes are good for kind of like really investigating like any kind of statement that either a candidate would say, what special interest groups would say, and it's really sort of like they have their own independent research teams about whether that's true or false about what they're proclaiming. Whether that's like fully true, if it's like absolutely false to the point where it's probably not going to be worth taken seriously, or kind of like right in the middle where it's like somewhat true but misleading in some ways, or there's some things that have been omitted. So another way of finding like any kind of support or opposition to bills, whenever a candidate speaks about what they've supported or opposed and why, you can check out GovTrack and Ballotpedia. Those are good websites to, basically kind of recording their votes. So that way, if somebody really is being honest or dishonest, then you can check kind of like on the record about which bills they've supported, what the language is in the bills, and how that's going to impact people with disabilities. And within our entire state, I also like the Bridge magazine. They talk a lot about the issues that that really speak to people in Michigan, that are relevant to our entire state. And that's what I really appreciate about it, is that it's also very investigative. So when it comes to political elections, and they provide some really, really valid information for kind of like informing people about what's happening. And then you base off your response off of that. So I'm going to move this toggle right here because it's kind of blocking my whole slide here. So when it comes to reviewing the ballot, to really review the ballot, I mean, first of all, you've got to be registered. But secondly, there is a website called the Michigan Voter Information Center. And basically what you do is type in your first and last name, your date of birth, including the year that you were born, and then your zip code. And once you click on it, you're registered. Then there is a button that says sample ballot, like view sample ballot. And when you click on it, it should have a slate of candidates along with ballot proposals. Now, if you're not really sure about which candidates you're supporting, I would say that, you know, most people get kind of caught up on, you know, who to vote for in, you know, the circuit and county judges. People don't really know enough about that because it's not advertised enough. And also ballot proposals can be confusing. So if you have any kind of questions, don't feel afraid to ask any of them that either know about the candidates or especially know about the ballot proposals, because it can be kind of tricky to understand what those definitions about, you know, villages or anything like that can really impact people. So especially people with disabilities. So,
Noah?
Yeah.
Before we move on, can you explain what a ballot proposal is?
Yeah, so a ballot proposal can normally includes either a millage or some kind of proposal where it's some kind of funding based off of like our tax dollars for the most part. That's usually what it is. And an example of that would be, for example, emergency 911 services within Ingham County, where I live. There's kind of like a tax millage where they have a certain level of funding, and that would go into like emergency security cameras, any kind of like 911 services and stuff like that. So that would be one where it's kind of like an example of that. Another one that another example of that has been really contentious within where I used to live was about you know, like a funding for either affordable housing or going for a community lot. So that's like within Ann Arbor, they had this debate on whether to support affordable housing or a people's lot where that would be funded. So it turned very contentious, but eventually people voted for the community lot. But there's still this discussion about affordable housing within that city because that's been a problem lately. So that would be two good examples of that.
Thank you.
All right.
Noah, we do have a question if you're willing to take a question from Sarah right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
I know that I don't remember what I was gonna ask.
That's okay, Sarah. If you wanna think about it and then raise your hand again, we can get to you right away.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
Oh no, that's okay.
Okay.
That's definitely fine. All right. So to be able to register to vote, you must be a Michigan resident, and then you must be at least 18 years old and a U.S. citizen. And in Michigan state law, if you're incarcerated with a felony currently sentenced, then unfortunately you're not allowed to vote. But once you're out, then you're able to vote. But some people have spread misinformation about people who have left either a jail or prison, and they were fed misinformation that they're not allowed to vote, which is false. If you no longer have a felony, then you're still able to vote. So don't let that stop you. And then you get to fill out an application by using a driver's license or a state ID. That's very common. That's the most common way to actually get to be able to register to vote. But there's also some alternative options, such as a bank or utility statements, and you can also use the paychecks, from your employer. And what's going to happen is that the clerk will send you a voter ID card. Now, from my experience, when I was able to give a voter ID card to my poll worker, they weren't really looking for that. They were more looking for more of like a driver's license or state ID, even though we're technically not a strict voter ID state by law. So please keep that in mind. And you will receive access to a sample ballot, how to contact your clerk, and which polling place you're going to need to go to, whether it's from NVIC or the League of Women Voters, which also has, sort of like find your polling precinct, and then you'll be able to find that out.
Noah, before we move on, we have 2 questions.
Sure.
Frank asked, is there a way, and he asked way in the beginning, so I want to make sure we don't lose it. He says paper ballots are tough on some. Is there ways to make it accessible during COVID-19? So I asked him to clarify, and he said, can you help or provide a vote machine for marking ballots?
Okay. So what we've been advocating for is that there should be some in-person voting. Recently, during the entire country, some states have only reduced a lot of the polling precincts to just 1, and that's very dangerous. But thankfully, in the state of Michigan, they've basically outlawed that. So you are able to vote within your precinct. For the primary, that would be in August 4th. So you can basically also register during the same day within the clerk's office, and then go to your precinct. Or if you've already been registered and you want to vote within the precinct, you can do that. But this time it's more that you're going to have to socially distance from other people and really practice safety guidelines. But they should be set up to be accessible, and that's really important. And voting machines have to be turned on. They got to be accessible towards, pretty much every single person with a disability. And it should be universal for poll workers to say if anyone wants to be on the touch screen or the tabulator, like the tabulating machine. So that's really what needs to happen. But right now, currently, we are a vote by mail state, which is what I'm going to get into.
Thank you, Noah. And one more question from Sue on Facebook. How do we know if our person can cognitively understand the candidate's agenda and ballot proposals?
As far as understanding the agenda, I feel like if anyone is not sure what that agenda is, then feel free to contact people who know about this policy and also break it down in simple language. That way, they'll get a better understanding about what that really means. So that way, they'll gain more of a better understanding of what that's all about, and then they can weigh in whether they support that or not.
Are there
Okay.
organizations that provide that service, Noah?
Mark, you were about to say something?
Well, no, I was going to add something else, but go ahead.
Okay. So I would say that a lot of people that really understand what that issue is, such as like if you're kind of like unsure about that, then you can go to any policy expert in that entire specific policy, and they can break it down in simple language. So whether that's about healthcare, whether that's about economic opportunities for people, whether if that means about confronting the coronavirus, kind of like whether if they're talking about eliminating poverty in the neighborhoods, for example, or if it's kind of from a different perspective. So I think that within certain agencies, I would say if they're really active in a political issue that you're being really confused about, then I would recommend contacting them first.
What I was going to add, thanks, Noah. What I was going to add was that there is no requirement that you show that you can understand what's going on with an issue or with a candidate as a prerequisite to voting. Many states limit the ability of people under guardianships to vote. Michigan is not one of those states. We are one of the few states that allow people, even under a guardianship, to vote without restriction.
Yeah, and if you're unsure about a certain issue, then don't feel held back by that to prevent you from voting. We don't want that to happen. What we want you to do is contact somebody who is sort of like an expert on that issue, like a policy expert, and then they'll break it down for you.
We actually have one more question from Facebook. Tracy, if you want to go ahead and read it now.
Okay, sure. So Danny asks, would it be helpful for companies that provide staffing for individuals residing in group homes to have a political liaison, someone to keep facts about local politics on hand and can even train other staff members about being a non-biased informer for the people that need assistance?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch everything.
Okay, so she asks, would it be helpful for companies that provide staffing for individuals who reside in group homes to have a political liaison there? So this liaison would be someone who could keep facts about local politics and can even train other staff members about being a non-biased informer for the people that need assistance.
Yeah, I would say that would definitely be recommended. And what I've seen sort of like as being a problem is that people who live in group homes seem to be unfortunately isolated away from political issues because typically they've been institutionalized. So they generally have a tendency to be having like a lower turnout than those who are not in group homes. But Mark, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that you also, for an individual who has a person-centered plan, the person-centered planning process can take advantage of, it can include how to become informed about voting and how to become a certificate by exercising your voting rights. So it's not just about providing support in a home setting. It's also about making sure that individuals have the ability to grow in as self-advocates and grow those abilities to learn about issues and about candidates.
Are there any more questions, or can I continue?
Not at this time, Noah. Continue.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to continue on to voting by mail, because Michigan is a vote by mail state. All voters are eligible for absentee voting in Michigan now. And you don't have to provide a reason this time. You had 4 reasons, where if you're overseas or in the military, if you're an elderly person or somebody with disability. Now you don't have to provide any kind of reason, and that makes it a whole lot more accessible. That being said, there are some valid criticisms of vote by mail that include that the regular print, large printed in Spanish, are not really always accessible to people who are blind and low vision. And recently there's been, due to a lawsuit that was against the Secretary of State under a consent decree, blind and low vision voters have an electronic ballot access that has been used for overseas voters and people who are military veterans, where they electronically submit their ballot on who they vote for. And that was a big win for the blind community and the low vision and visually impaired voters. And you can register the same day when you're voting at the clerk's office, like I said before. And for deadlines for absentee ballots during the general election is October 19th, 2020. And for the primary, that's going to be in July 20th of 2020. So if you want to send an absentee ballot, you probably want to do that very soon, sooner rather than later, so that you'll be able to not have to deal with going into the polls in person. But if you want to vote in person, you can bring a driver's license, a state ID, or other documents with a photo with you to your polling place. If you don't have a photo identification that is accepted by poll workers, then you should have the right to sign an affidavit. And then you say your name and address and sign the list of voters, so that way a poll worker can give you a ballot. Or if you choose, you can go to electronic ballot marketing device, which is a voting machine. And they have to be turned on, they have to work. So if you see something in where the voting machine is not at all accessible, then please contact us, because we are going to be able to contact the clerk, so that way during the next time that you're voting, that it'll be prepared to be turned on, and hopefully you won't have any troubles with the machine. So basically, once that's turned on, then you fill out the ballot, put it in a private secrecy sleeve, and take it to a tabulating machine. And what should happen is that you're basically putting the ballot into the tabulating machine, it accepts it, and then you get an I voted sticker. And that's basically what, like how that really works when you're in person. And during the coronavirus, because of the coronavirus right now, they're probably going to have to require you to wear a mask and socially distance from people at least 6 feet away. And they're going to have some specific instructions.
No, I had a question about, 2 questions about the electronic ballot marketing terminal. One is, can anyone use that terminal, or do you have to have a disability? And the other is, can a person be required to use the terminal if they have a disability?
So basically, for the electronic ballot marking, device, which is the voting machine, basically what needs to happen is that the poll workers need to ask whether you want to use the machine or not.
So anyone can use it. It doesn't. You don't have to have a
Anyone can
disability.
use it. Yeah, it
Okay.
doesn't have to just be a person with a disability. In fact, if they only ask some people, if they only ask people with disabilities if they want to use it, then basically what that is segregated voting, and that we want to definitely avoid.
So can a clerk force you to use the machine? You don't want to?
They need to ask you if they want to use the machine, and then you can either say yes or no, and then if you say yes, then they're gonna have to direct you to the voting machine and have it prepared, and if not, then they're going to give you a traditional paper ballot. So rights about voter accessibility includes registration, parking, and there have been some instances where parking has been a problem. Physical access, in this circumstance, doors have to be at least wider than 32 inches, but I bet because of the fact that people have bigger wheelchairs, I'm hoping that they expand beyond 32 inches, because some wheelchairs still can't fit into around 32 inches. And that was something that I've realized when I went into Detroit about a year ago, and someone with a disability said that their wheelchair could not fit into a 32-inch door. So hopefully that'll be updated at some point. Your rights are to access an alternative marketing device when you want to. While you do have the right to get help from others, you also have the right to privacy and independence when voting. And there have been some people with disabilities that had neither of that. And we've been able to resolve those problems, but later on. But while that was happening, that's basically a form of being disenfranchised and having your vote taken away from you somehow because you couldn't access it. You do have the right to absentee ballots, and with help from others, basically your right is to get help from 2 precinct delegates, which is a Democrat and a Republican precinct delegate under the current Michigan state law.
Noah, are there any limits on if you want to bring somebody with you to help you with the ballot? Is there any limit on that?
Well, they can't really tell you like any kind of like bias when it comes to helping you on the ballot. They need to explicitly use the language that is like on the ballot.
But if you wanted to bring like an attendant or a member of your family, somebody to help you with the ballot as an accommodation, could you do that?
You could, as long as it's not a union representative or an employer.
Okay, so
people to vote.
So the state law says that that the person can't be a union representative or somebody from your employer, right?
Right.
Okay.
So this video embedded right here is called Vote for Access, and this is about voting at the polls. And we have 2 people being featured here. One is the Lansing clerk, and one person that we helped be able to vote, and he's from Flint, Michigan. So Yeah, the Lansing clerk. Something to keep in mind is that the Lansing clerk, they kind of mistakenly had him being listed as somebody from Ohio, but that's not true. He's from Lansing, Michigan, and there's also somebody from Alabama who, you know, has like her own issues with being able to access the ballot marketing devices, but it's still relevant, however. So I'm going to click on this if you don't mind.
Imagine this. It's election day. A young black woman with arm crutches walks down the street. She reaches the candidates. You know where your polling place is. Annie Ruiz Transportation. She stops and looks up at an enormous flight of stairs. Then you arrive at the polling center. Nothing goes to plan, and you can't cast your vote. She shakes her crutch angrily. The truth of the matter is, you can vote for everything and still be known with inaccessibility at the polls. My name is Amani Barber. I'm a disabled voter, and this is Vote for Access. Amani in the studio. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, has been in existence for decades and is designed to provide equitable access for people with disabilities. Since this law is the age of your average millennial, how come the ADA is less enforced than my student loan repayment plan? Amani purses her lips. In addition to the ADA, there are several laws. The Help America Vote Act, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Voting Accessibility for the Elderly and Handicapped Act of 1984, and National Voter Registration Act of 1993. These laws already demand that voters with disabilities have the right to accessible, private, and independent voting. However, come voting day, this often isn't the case. Let's hear from Carmen from Alabama about their day at the polls. I need accommodations that are accessible and operable. And when I say accessible, I mean that when I get there, if there's a machine there that has print on it, I'm not able to see what the print is. So I would need to know what was on the screen. On several occasions when I've gotten to a polling precinct, the machines are somewhat still in the box, not plugged up, and I've actually been told that they were not going to turn them on. I have poll workers that are not sure how to utilize the machine, Automark specifically, to help me go on the machine when I get there. And sometimes I even have poll workers that stand behind me while I'm voting, and they're watching the screen as well. Voting with the need for accommodation could be a gamble when you consider all that is out of your control. Legally, polling places are required to be accessible, so it can be done to improve access. There are several things that should be considered for polling places to be accessible. The space should be physically accessible, with safe ramps available. Accessible parking and access to transit should also be prioritized. If you have an invisible disability, having seating available while you wait is super important. Some places have an option called curbside voting. It's targeted for voting. It doesn't fix the problem of having an inaccessible polling place, but if it's staffed and easy to locate, it can add another option for access. Accessible voting units, or AVUs, allow voters to make selections in a variety of ways. The machines need to be set up properly, in a place with privacy, and poll workers need to know how to use them. They should also offer the use of the accessible voting unit to all voters. For example, a voter with dyslexia may prefer to use an AVU to listen to ballot information rather than reading. Good poll workers can make inaccessible spaces more accessible.
I'm Chris Swope. I'm the city clerk for the city of Lansing. Michigan got all new equipment just a couple of years ago, so it was a different piece of equipment. The poll workers hadn't used it as much, had studied voters come through and use it. And we started to get feedback from a couple of voters that they felt discouraged from using it, and that was the last thing we wanted. If those people that are there to assist a voter through the voting process don't feel confident or seem confident with a part of the process or a piece of the equipment, it doesn't instill confidence in the voter.
Although 60 to 70% of polling places are inaccessible, there's no national outrage or even awareness. Eric from Michigan spent years trying to vote and was finally successful.
And I was inside the polling location, and they said they had the auto voting machine, but all they had was the headphones. And the MIDI controllers, they did not have the device for me, and I was like, that's it. I'm not going to do it.
Eric in his power chair in front of an EVU.
Yeah, but it wasn't even plugged in. I was finally able to vote private and independently 20 or 21 years later.
The longest anyone who wants to vote should have to wait. It's in 18 years we all have to wait in America. If you can't get to a polling center, you can contact local officials to ask for assistance. Options like the Election Protection Hotline and reaching out to your local protection and advocacy agency to provide you with support on election day. Dial 866 our vote. Dial 866-687-8683. Yes, I need some help. It's a hot mess here right now. And keep watching this series at Vote for Access.
This is Vote for Access.
All right. So that was the presentation. Let me expand here. So for perspective here for the Lansing City Clerk, during the 2018 election, there had been some issues with voting machine access. So we were able to provide a training to the poll workers for the 2019 local elections, and we basically taught them about disability competency for people with disabilities, and being able to universally ask everybody if they want to use the polling machine or a touch screen. And as a result, 70% of the people in Lansing used a voter machine. They used a voting machine. And they were able to get it prepared and working. And one of the key aspects is getting a ambassador to allow to, basically lead people to the machine and have it prepared, turned on, and working. And by far the only issue that they had was that some kind of error within, printing the ballot out. So that was pretty much like the only issue. And then in regards to the person from Flint, I was able to contact the city and county clerk to resolve the problem with that he had basically had. And that was not getting access with a sip and puff to his voting machine. And finally, after 20 to 21 years, he was able to thankfully get the access to vote for the first time. So if you have any kind of problems with voting, whether it's physically being able to access the polling place, if you have trouble with voting absentee, which is probably going to be more common, then I would recommend contacting the Election Protection Hotline. And again, just like what Amani Barbarin said, it is 1-866-687-8683. And that provides the most immediate services to those who have been having trouble voting or have been denied the right to vote. And another option would be to also contact our intake and referral team and in our office, and we'll give you information about that as well. So so right below here is our Lansing office phone number. It is 1-800-228-5923. And our Marquette office, which is smaller, is 1-866-928-5910. And just like what Mark said, we're a federally designated protection and advocacy agency serving Michigan. Our mission is to advocate for the rights of people with disabilities, and we operate under best wishes and self-determination. And then there is a protection and advocacy agency organization in all of the states and territories. And because we're a nonprofit, our services are free and confidential. And that should be it. I'm going to stop the share. And if anyone else has additional questions, feel free.
Noah, we did have another question. When I voted for the primary, Trump and Biden were on the ballot. Why?
Okay. Well, sometimes I believe that was sort of are you talking about the like during the March primary?
Yes, I voted by mail. And I noticed that they were not on the ballot.
That's interesting because in my ballot they didn't have Trump or Biden. They were like the presumptive nominees. And during the March ballot for the March elections, they should have either Trump or Biden on there, not during August. That's
So I think that Barb missed a word. So she said when she voted for the August primary, Trump or Biden were not on the ballot. And why were they not on the ballot for the August primary? Is
okay.
What the question
So
should be.
they're not on the ballot because they already had their primaries back in March. So and that was like when Biden was facing off against Bernie Sanders, and Trump was like the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party. So although there were some other people that were included in that ballot, so during the state primaries, it's a little bit different, where they basically, in the highest level of office that's on that state primary is the U.S. federal senators. And then it goes all the way down to U.S. House of Representatives and the state house. So that's kind of the reason why Trump and Biden were not on the ballot.
All right, thank you, Noah.
No problem.
At this time, we're just open for any questions that our participants have for either Noah or Mark. So you can either unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, or type your questions in the chat. And I wanted to check back with Tracy to see if we had any additional questions or comments on the Facebook Live.
No, there are no additional comments or questions at this time.
So
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a little concerned if we assist my adult son with autism to vote, that can be challenged, because, I mean, the fact is there is some cognitive impairment, and frankly, we almost feel like we'd be telling him who to vote for. So I would rather even not have him vote than get in trouble somehow. What do you say to that?
I would disagree with that. I don't think that cognitive ability should be a negative factor towards not being able to vote. It would be really recommended that that he would be informed about certain issues, in simple and plain language as much as possible, and be able to research the candidates and about ballot proposals that can be tricky, and have like a policy expert, break it all the way down in simple and plain language. That way, down to his sort of like cognitive level. That way he would that way he would kind of have a better understanding. And it would be recommended that this person would also have a bit of a sample ballot. And really, in Michigan, cognitive malfunctions are not really an obstacle within the state of Michigan towards voting legally. So we're going to discourage people, therefore, from making that as being more of a setback, if you would.
So there's no legal basis. There's no legal basis for the clerk to challenge his ability to vote. Right?
Okay. Hi, Mark. This is Kalila.
Hey, Kalila.
Yeah.
No, there's no legal basis. There's no legal basis for the clerk to say you can't vote.
Okay, and there's a part on the ballot where you sign if you help the person. I don't know, in the current climate, I just imagine somehow somebody coming to arrest me or something.
Nope.
No, that's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both so much.
Noah, there's a question in the chat. Will the flyer you posted with the 1-800 number, the flyer you showed rather with the 1-800 number be posted at polling locations?
Well, I can basically put that on there. Are you specifically talking about like the about like our office phone number, or are you talking about the election protection hotline number?
I believe she's referencing the election protection hotline, and she's
Sure.
saying that if they're not posted at polling places, they should be.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we could, but I'm gonna let people get that number.
There's no legal requirement that I know of that the clerks post that information. I agree, it should be, but there is no legal requirement that they be posted.
Are there any additional questions for our presenters today?
Hi, this is Angela. I'm joining late, but I did have one question. So if a person is going to a polling place and they change their mind and they suddenly want to have that on that paper ballot, can they just go right to the clerk and take care of that right then and there? You know, they maybe have gotten the invitation and didn't fill it out, or suddenly see that there's too many people and they're worried about COVID. Can they quickly go and change their mind and do that paper ballot right there at the polling place?
No, do you want me to take a shot at this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Angela, as I understand it, you're talking about somebody who goes to vote, originally wants to vote in person, and then decides that they don't want to stand in a line and want to do an absentee or vote, absentee ballot instead.
Yeah, it gets too scary because maybe there's just, I know myself, I really like to vote in person, but you suddenly see, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people there and you know, they're worried about COVID and they suddenly change their mind.
Right. So there's no requirement that, so you can go to the clerk's office to vote absentee at that point. There's no requirement that they offer the absentee option at the precinct. So you would have to, now it's possible that they might offer it, but there's no requirement that the clerk do that. So you would have to then go to the clerk's office. You could then vote absentee at the clerk's office or at whatever location the clerk designated as a place where you can vote absentee on election day.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Because I think that there's for some people that might still be it's going to be another kind of last minute decision for some people, like they planned on it, but then it's that secondary challenge of, can I get to the clerk's office then? So I didn't know.
No, it is a real challenge. I mean,
it is a challenge.
The legislature sort of added that requirement in after Proposal 3 was approved by the voters.
I would have to say that the legislature from the Republican Party, they've limited to only the clerk's office when, personally, in my opinion, it should be pretty much, you know, and there should be more options.
We had advocated that those options be available at the precinct, but that is not what happened. The other thing to keep in mind is that at the precincts themselves, you can ask for accommodations. So, for example, if one of the barriers to a person voting is there's a line for, and they need to be able to sit. They can't stand for a long period of time. You can ask for an accommodation that they either be allowed to go forward or to have a place to sit. So some of those conditions that might lead someone to not want to wait around and vote in person are things that you can ask for accommodations to address.
Thank you.
Mark, we have another question. Do professional guardians appointed by the probate court have any responsibility making sure the people they have guardianship over have access to voting? I know their mail goes to the guardianship office, so the guardian would have received the mail-in ballot application. Good question.
Yeah, no kidding. I think the guardians do have that responsibility, but that's just me talking. They certainly a plenary guardian, if they have authority and responsibility to provide a whole range of supports, I think that it includes helping the person exercise their rights, which includes the right to vote.
Yeah, guardians should be able to provide that responsibility. And if they don't, then they kind of risk getting sued by disability organizations. So it would be kind of imperative for them to be able to help people with disabilities, kind of help them to vote, just to be on the good side, but also to make sure that people with disabilities actually that are under guardianship to have that rare opportunity to really voice their opinion in how policies to be carried out. And that's under supported decision making. So
my question is, because I did receive, everyone in Michigan received the application. Do people with guardians or the public guardians even know that they received the ballot application?
It's a good question. I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not the expert on that issue either.
They should.
And Laura commented back when we were talking about on Angela's question, she says that it's her understanding that the only way you can't vote absentee that day would be if the clerk had already received and processed your original absentee ballot.
Right. So you can ask if you got an absentee ballot and then you decided you wanted to go to the polling place and vote in person, but you've already cast an absentee ballot, you can't cast more than one ballot. You can, if the ballots have not been counted, you can ask that the ballot be voided. But if you voted a ballot before it hasn't been processed, you can ask that it be voided and that you be offered the opportunity to vote again. And if you're not sure about that, then one thing you can ask for is you at least be offered the opportunity to vote a provisional ballot. And so that you're not denied the right to be able to cast a vote on election day.
This is Margaret Keys Howard from Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. Thank you so much for this event. We're having a voting rally event later on this afternoon for our members as well. So I was wondering though, based on the conversation the guest asked a few minutes ago about her son voting, would there be any scenario that you could tell us that would be an inappropriate designation for a person to be able to vote, as far as their cognitive skills being challenged, etc.? Would there be any situation that you could share with us that might, because I have heard that question before, people are afraid to assist now, mostly because of the climate of the country, not so much Michigan, but could you give us any indication that would there be any scenarios where a person's cognitive skills, whether they were really had the ability to vote, would there be any such scenario that you could describe?
In Michigan, no.
Yeah, not in Michigan.
The only scenario would be if a person tried to register if they were currently incarcerated in a prison for a felony, or if they brought an employer or union representative with them, who then we're going to proceed to try to help them vote.
Right.
Those are really the two limitations. I mean, there's no competency test.
And some of the other states actually do discriminate against people with disabilities when it comes to like mental incapacity, and that means that there are basically people who are mentally viewed as being mentally incompetent. But that's a way for people with disabilities to be discriminated against for not being able to vote, therefore disenfranchising them.
So if you run into that circumstance at a polling place where, say, a clerk or somebody else is trying to tell you that a person has to have some level of competency to vote, that's worth a complaint, because essentially they're trying to discourage people who have the right to vote from voting.
That's good to know. And with the absentee ballot, the same way, if someone assists and they sign, they won't be challenged to prove any further competency, etc. Is that what you're telling them?
They should not be required
No,
to
they
do
should not be.
No.
Okay, thank you so much. It comes up quite frequently in the last few weeks. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? And that's one of the reasons this was an important topic for us to cover, just because there's so many unanswered questions, and people think one thing, but really the law is on the side of people with disabilities, at least in our state. Are there any other questions for our presenters today? Noah, do you want to talk about the Go Voter webinars?
Yeah, so the Go Voter webinars are going to be based off of, they're going to be for the Go Voter surveys, and they're going to be presentations. The first one is going to be about registering to vote. The second one is basically about how to basically vote during the current laws that we have in Michigan, and then the last one is going to be about basically how to get through any kind of challenges that people with disabilities have. And the first webinar is going to be on the 21st at 1 p.m. And then the second one is going to be on the 28th. That's at 1 p.m. And then the last one is going to be in July 30th at 1 p.m. And both myself and Sarah Carney are going to present those entire PowerPoints. And if anyone has any questions, then please feel free. And those are the links to the webinars right below.
Thank you, Noah. So for the folks at Detroit Wayne Integrated Health, this might be a good opportunity for you to pass on to the people that are going to be presenting or that are going to be participating in your voter, in the voter, whatever you're doing on Friday, so that they could get a little bit more opportunity, especially if there's new voters.
Yeah, and I think that one person wants to for us to share that that flyer, so we should be able to do that.
For sure.
If you share it, we will pass it along. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes. Can I get a copy of the flyer?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I would like to thank Mark and Noah for both being with us today and taking time out to present on this very important topic. Noah, can you remind us when the absentee ballot application deadline passed for the August primary?
No, the last day that you can do that is July 20th.
And that's next week, Monday.
Next week, Monday. So you do still have time. And I believe if you go on to the website that we posted earlier, the Voter Information Center, you can make the request online. There's an online application. However, you do have to print it and sign it. If you don't sign the application, you won't receive a ballot in the mail. And so if there are no other questions, thank you all for joining us. And we will see you next week, next Thursday at 11.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Go vote.
Thanks, Mark and Noah.
All right.
Thank
You
you.
did a good job.
No problem.